Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And today's episode might be a first for this podcast. We are talking real-world events and how it may or may not impact your business. We're talking DOGE. They are stealing the news, the limelight these days. Dogecoin took over, I think, in 2020 or 2021. But if you haven't heard what's going on with Doge and the U.S. government, well, you're in for a real treat today. I have a guest, a repeat guest. You heard Kevin about 2 weeks ago at this point on this podcast, talking about interacting with the government contracting. That's what his business specializes in. But today we're talking Doge. So Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited to dive in with you.
This is a fun topic. Well, I don't know, fun relative to it's happening right now. And it's interesting to talk through what does it really mean and how much is it going to impact you? So it's worth digging into.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the news. It's all over social media. I try not to interact with those two platforms, but you really can't avoid what's going on with Doge. It's everywhere. People are talking about it. So I'm personally curious. You can see it from both sides, right? It's good. It's bad. It's going to kill you. It's going to save you. The world is ending. All of these things, right?
All these, yes.
Why don't we start with just the context? Like what is Doge really, and what is the mission of Doge from your perspective?
Well, the tricky part of the answer is what is Doge really is an undefinable concept because this is unique to our history. So what I'll talk through is how I understand it based on helping government contractors navigate this. So the basic principle of what Doge is doing is to make government more efficient. And the short answer to that is make it smaller. Of course, the answer to that question of should government be smaller, we as humans, we as citizens want government to be smaller until we feel it. And so that's the ironic part of number one. And number two is that's kind of the intent here is that we shrink it enough. I'm reading tea leaves here, but we shrink it enough that people start to feel it. We know we went too far and they can stabilize. I think that's the intent of how they're playing this out. But what I spend a lot of time doing is helping people understand how does it affect you and your business? How much of this is I'll use the concept of you want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. And remember, thermostat sets the temperature and a thermometer reacts to the temperature. In this current environment, with all the stuff going on, all the moving parts, including Doge, it's really easy to be a thermometer and react. And so have an idea of what am I reacting to and does this impact me? So I have three questions that help people kind of framework this. And then I have a concept that'll help map it out more. But I'll start with the first one.
Well, before we dive in, I just want to put this out there because I can't speak for you. I personally don't vote. I don't take sides. I could care less about politics. I like to observe. So this episode, this conversation, I'm really just asking the questions, and I'm curious. I'm curious at what's going on. I'm curious how that plays out on a national level. Although we do have a president that he has a business background. You can't ignore that. Logically, from a capitalist business perspective, this makes sense. No, the theory of making something smaller and more efficient, so it's AKA more profitable in business terms, is that kind of where this is coming from?
So if you zoom out far enough, yes. The problem with that is that business and government they're kind of, what do they call that? They're related, but not, they're similar, but not congruent, right? Yeah. And so the things that you do in like, for example, government doesn't make profit. Now, government should have a balanced budget. That's a different conversation. That's been a problem for over 100 years. So that's not something we're going to fix in 5 minutes. But I like how you brought this up, this context of I'm not making this from a political perspective. Our contractors, the clients that we support, and frankly, the government employees that we support, I've been in this business across 5 presidents and lots of different ways that this swings. At the end of the day, my business exists to help people understand government contracting better, to do GovCon well, government contracting well, from both sides. And so whether there's a Republican, a Democrat, whatever the situation is, at the end of the day, I believe that if our government contracting system, because we've decided we're going to have contractors do the work. Our missions are met. I mean, everything from turning on the lights to run the websites to all kinds of things, building buildings, it's done by industry, it's done by contractors. I believe we do that well, our country is stronger. So that's how I get brought into these conversations of DOGE, is that I'm dealing with the world of government contracting every day. And so the question of how does DOGE impact government contractors and impact our ability to function as a government contracting entity, that's a moving target. And that's what stresses people out. That's the word of the year is uncertainty. And because that's all over the map. That's not just in DOGE. I mean, that's in the economy, et cetera. And this is a transition we're going through. And to put folks, to zoom out a little bit and kind of give you some context, we've been through a civil war. We've been through 9/11. I've been a contracting officer through 9/11, through the Great Recession, through sequestration, which was a big balancing of the budget exercise. There have been these seismic shocks to how government contracting works. This is another one. Each one of them felt unique at the time, and we come out the other end of them. And in the moment, it's what they call it, the miserable middle. Whenever you're going through a cycle, that's where we are right now. And so my attempt to help people understand in the big picture, again, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. How is this impacting you? And if it's not, or you can't see a way in which it's going to, don't waste your valuable business resource of time. That's the one you can't make more of. So protect that like a hawk. And it's very easy to get down rabbit trails of, well, woulda, shoulda, coulda, this might change, that may change. You don't know. So yeah, I could rabbit trail that all day long.
Yeah, well, I derailed you. That's my fault. I wanted to put that out there so people didn't think this was a political episode. But
I appreciate that.
These three questions.
Yeah,
I think they're fantastic.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought me back to baseline. I got all excited to give everybody the meat here, but you need to baseline the idea of this isn't politics. This is understanding what you can do as a business. So the first question is that a big number? Is when someone says we're taking 150 billion, a trillion, 32 billion is the latest number I've heard that is trackable that DOGE is taking out of the economy. Okay, first of all, the U.S. government's a $17 trillion. Actually, the U.S. economy is a $17 trillion. It's a monster, right? Of that, the government, if you take all of the pieces of it, it's maybe 1.5 trillion. So it's small numbers, right? If we shrink that by 32 billion, it's not likely to impact you. So it makes great news, and you're right, it's dominating the news. You hear about it every night. And when I look out at the number of things our clients do, yes, they were impacted more by the executive orders than by DOGE in particular. Mm-hmm. And yet we had employees of the USAID who subscribe to our content that have had to cancel their subscription. Okay, we felt that. But when you have a couple hundred customers, I mean, it sucks for that one person. But again, I can't change that. So be aware of how much is this going to impact you by asking that question. Is this a big number? And so, for example, when a couple of our subscribers left, that's not a big number. 32 billion out of, for example, the Department of Defense budget is over 800 billion. So to take 32 billion out of the entire U.S., we'll just call it the budget entirely, that's what's that, less than 5%. It's not a seismic shift. It feels like it because it's in the news, right? It makes a lot of news, but zoom out and go, how's this impacting me? So that's the first question. Is this a big number? Because if you don't know, you get distracted.
Because I am curious about this, and I want to see what's true, what's false, what's hyperbole and inflated. So I pulled up the U.S. National Debt Clock. They've added a section for the DOGE clock, the savings. Mm-hmm. It reads, and I want to hear your feedback on this, 370-ish billion, and the savings per taxpayer of over $3,200 at the moment of the recording of this episode. So why don't you explain to me, to me, I don't have that much money. That's actually a big number. I don't know if it's a big number. So help me answer that question for myself when I read this. A, is it a big number? And B, is it true?
So I want to tiptoe around this without picking any fights. I would say as a standalone number, it's not that it's untrue, it's misleading. So for example, if I cancel a contract, and I want to put on government hat for you, most service contracts with the US government are 5-year contracts. It's a base year plus 4 one-year options. Let's say I award a $100 million contract and I have a base year of 20 million, and then I have 4 more years at $20 million each. If I cancel that contract in year 1, and I only spent $10 million of it, I could argue that I saved quote unquote, $90 million.
Mm.
You didn't spend it. So and frankly, this happens a lot where the money is going to be reallocated. So part of this is, I mean, I would, you could track the numbers and say, oh, this contract we were going to spend this, therefore we saved it in the future. That's not the same. Like, you and I don't budget that way. I mean, if we don't buy a car in the future, we save money by not buying a car. Well, no, you save money by like reducing your bills. It's just not the same thing.
No, my wife does that when she goes to the store and she's like, it was on sale. I saved $50, but you spent $4,000. That's
Right.
not the same. No, I'm kidding. My wife doesn't actually do that, but I know I've heard some women, some wives do that. So they will remain unnamed for this episode.
There you go. That's a rabbit trail. Well, and so the again, it's not meant. I don't know. I don't want to say it's meant to be misleading, but it's contextual. Which this is a great segue. My next question is, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. So when someone says we cut this budget by 5%, what does that mean? Does that mean you cut the people? You cut the what we call out year spending? There's a lot of most contracts, I would argue, have an out year spending to them, and by removing those out year spending, that tells you that opportunity is not going to be there if you sell to that government agency, because they're no longer doing it. But that's not really savings. The other side of this is that a lot of contracts, there's a termination for convenience clause that's in every government contract, not every, but almost every government contract. And so when the government has the right to terminate a contract and say, poof, we are no longer going to pay for this work. Lots of those have come out. Like, lots of contracts were terminated for convenience. Now, the way that clause reads most of the time is you're entitled to termination costs. So here's what I mean by the news being a little bit squirrely. We had a client who they had a 1-year contract. It was terminated for convenience 2 weeks before the year was up. By doing it that way, they were actually entitled to termination costs, which is what it costs to get rid of these employees. You have severance packages. You have to terminate leases on buildings, all that stuff, right? You're entitled to those costs when the government turns off the contract. Well, in this case, those costs were more than the actual contract would have been. But it made great news to say that you canceled the contract. See what I'm saying? It's like that. It can be very, again, what does that mean? That question of, hey, we terminated 50 contracts. Okay, were they 2 days away from ending on their own? So there's a lot of nuance like that. And that's why it can be very easy to get sucked into the vortex of, well, what about this? What about that? And just take it with a grain of salt. There's an effort to shrink the government. That's all you need to care about at the ground level of your business until your contract gets canceled or gets terminated for convenience. Again, that's what we help our clients figure out how to deal with that. This doesn't impact you. In the future, it may impact you that if it's something that you used to sell to the government and they're no longer buying it, okay, that's a problem. But that's a business problem. I mean, that happens in the world. That's where your original question about running the government like a business, these are the kind of things of assuming a contract lasts forever and keeps getting renewed and keeps getting recompeted over and over again and going on forever. That shouldn't be a thing. That's what's been quickly changing. And so that's the part that I think makes the government run more like a business, where you look at the qualifications of what you're doing and say, do we need to keep doing this? Businesses do that every day. The government sometimes doesn't do that as much. Why? Because a Congress member has people in their district who work on this contract and they like their job. See what I'm saying? Like, this is more complicated than just, there is no, I joke a lot that you're squeezing a balloon. If you push on one part of the economy, in the federal part of the economy, you're going to impact other parts of it. And I don't want to say you have to be okay with it, but you at least have to have an understanding of what it's going to mean.
Yeah, I think you have to be aware is what you're saying. And the practice in and of itself, I think it's very good. I mean, people complain about whether it's federal government or local municipal government getting those contracts. I mean, I've been in industries, I've owned businesses in industries where I've bid on work, and you hear things like, oh, it's all about politics. It's who you know. I mean, sometimes that is true. And that's a different episode. As a matter of fact, we probably covered that a little bit on our last episode together, but that this practice of looking at things from a business perspective, what is best for the taxpayer who's funding the government, and what's best for all parties involved. We don't want relationships to go on forever, like you said, just because we have them. Like, let's actually bid on the work that's going to have the best result for the end user. I think that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. Hopefully that's what comes out of this. And I think that might be a little bit of the goal, to run that more like a business rather than just these forever contracts.
Yeah, and there's a couple pieces to this. One, the way this is being executed is very much like with a hammer, as opposed to with any kind of finesse. That's creating its own problems. So, and again, that shouldn't be news to anybody. That's one of the biggest problems with this. I mean, back in the 90s, the government shrunk. Again, different party. The government shrunk by over 500,000 employees. Took them 7 years to do it, but it smoothly happened. And we've since grown back from that. Well, they're trying to do that 7 years of work in like a weekend. And that's why this feels really jarring, right? But to touch on a point you made a minute ago is that there's a perception that government contracts are all about relationship. There's a reality that sometimes they're all process, sometimes they're all relationship. Most of the time, like, I don't know, 90% of the time, they're somewhere in between. Because even if there's a process to award a contract to you, there's still, can you do the work? Do we trust you? There's still a human, like, again, what my role was, signing a contract. As a contracting officer, you sign a contract. That's a human signing a contract saying, I'm putting my name on here. I'm hiring this company to do the work. That may only be 1% of the decision, but it's still, there is a relationship piece of it. But there's also a process. And so that's a whole different, we have a whole podcast about that. Podcast episode 383 is called the process to relationship ratio, just on that idea of this is a ratio. And if you don't understand where you are in the process versus the relationship, this can be frustrating. And I think, to your point, that's one of the things that's happening right now. People think, oh, this is all relationship. Yeah, it's not all relationship, but there is a piece of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to, Kevin, toss your website on the screen. He mentioned his podcast episode, what'd you say? 383? 383. If you want to explore government contracting, and who knows, by the end of this episode, you very well might want to do that in your business. Go check that out. It's in the show notes description, wherever you're watching or listening. But Kevin, why don't we round this out? What's the third question we should be asking?
The third item is, so we talk about, what does it mean? The third one is, how does it matter? How does it impact me? And I have a rubric to kind of help people understand how that works. And what I mean, these forces around government contracting, there are three basic forces that impact government contracting. One of them is competition. How much competition is there for the work that you want to do? The second one is how much communication is the government going to have with you? That's the relationship piece. Like, how much are they going to talk to you? The third one is how much regulation is involved. And that makes a triangle. And what's happening right now is the regulation side, we'll call that the bottom of the three sides of the triangle. That side is shrinking. So if you look at the triangle, imagine that the bottom side is shrinking. That means the other two sides are getting longer. That means the communication side and the competition side are getting longer relative to the regulation. So when DOGE comes in and shrinks the budget, shrinks the capability of some government agencies to award contracts, shrinks the regulation, that's a lot of what's going on that I'm dealing with day to day. That means that it could be, not that it is, but it could be easier, in air quotes, for you to be able to actually compete for government contracts. Now you have more companies coming in. That means the competition is going to increase. That's how this could affect you. If you have government contracts, and let's say that they're not impacted by DOGE, like there's a lot of Department of Defense contracts. There are lots of contracts, frankly. I'm making up a percentage. I'm reading tea leaves, to be fair. I didn't research this. It's got to be 85 to 90% of contracts aren't impacted at all, other than just the uncertainty feel around them. But there's a lot of stuff that's not going away, right? I mean, most of our contracts weren't impacted at all. Most of our clients' contracts weren't impacted at all. So let's be real. But that regulation change, which DOGE is a part of, that is going to impact how the contracts are administered, how they're competed next time. That's what it means to you. So the easiest way to do this, look at that triangle and say, okay, if the regulation shrinks, does that increase the number of competitors? Does that increase the amount of communication I need from the government to understand what's going on? Do I need to build more relationships with contracting officers, with program managers, with government folks who this is what they do, the ones that are still there? Because there's some agencies all of their agencies are smaller to some extent. But the idea of understand how this impacts you. So those three questions of, is that a big number? And then what does it mean in context? Like one of the pricers I used to work with is a guy that specializes in doing government contract pricing. He used to joke about, sometimes you would get a number and it's an average phone number. The joke being, if you take phone numbers and average them, that doesn't tell you anything. So if somebody says, hey, we got 17 on this, what does that mean? It's like, it doesn't help me, right? So make sure you understand what it means. And then the third part is, how does this matter to your business? Understand how does the change in regulations impact you? And frankly, if you don't sell to the government, the tariffs are going to impact you more than DOGE. And the tariff, that's which again, I'm not an expert on that, but we have a whole podcast about that too. There's a clause in federal contracts on how you deal with tariffs. So this isn't a new concept, but these are the kind of things that you got to think about what's going to happen or what could happen and how does it impact me? And so much of what DOGE is doing, they're shrinking the number of people, and they're shrinking a lot of the funding, and they're shrinking some of the regulations. What if you haven't felt it yet? You're probably not going to. Frankly, which I just thought of that just now. That's an interesting point. If you haven't felt the impact of DOGE yet, you're probably not going to in your government contracts.
Yeah, I would have a feeling that the big obvious stuff they attacked first, and they've already found. What do you know when their contract expires? I heard it was end of May.
So it's not a contract. This is all kind of pro bono. That's these are the kind of things that when you say what does DOGE do, they're not the government will often hire people to study stuff like this. That's not what's happening in this case. And so that's what makes this kind of squirrely of like, well, what exactly are they doing? That being said, I mean, again, the news says that Musk is going back to focus on Tesla. And frankly, a lot of the goals that they set out to do have started to be met. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of momentum behind it. The bigger issue is we joke about, actually I shouldn't joke about it. We use the metaphor of the government is shaking the snow globe. The president is shaking the snow globe right now. Once he stops shaking the snow globe and the snow settles, then we can figure out, okay, what does the new version of government contracting look like? I can tell you from having been through these a few times, the basic concept of what government contracting is, which is government has decided contractors are better at doing things than the government. We decided that a couple hundred years ago. We continue to do that. The people who sign the contracts are contracting officers, and the funding for those contracts comes from Congress. That stuff's come out. That's coming out of the Constitution. Right now, they're shaking the snow globe on that a little bit, but functionally speaking, at the end of the day, Congress will give funding to contracting officers who will work with customers, the government users, to award contracts to contractors. That's what it's still going to look like that when we're done. We're in the miserable middle, so we have to work our way through it.
Yeah, I like it, and it's honestly when you talk about it that way, that really is crisis management 101. What is true?
I thought of it that way. Yeah.
What will remain? What will change? And where do I play in those gaps? And if you can just distill it down to those things, yeah, we're talking about government contracting here, but who knows? Maybe you have a client who's impacted by DOGE in some way, and now you can't serve them or they can't work with you. Who knows? What is still true? What will not change? And what are the fundamentals of what's in place? And I think if we can have that approach moving forward, the news becomes irrelevant. I hope the news becomes irrelevant because it's stupid. Why are we still watching the news? Kevin, do you watch the news?
Not anymore. Oh, well, that's not totally true. I'm very selective in. I'll put out a plug. Marketplace, NPR. That's the one kind of news source ish because they're very much into the whole and zooming out the overall economy. But like the regular mainstream news, there's not enough context to be able to do anything with it. So again, your time is your most valuable resource. So be careful where you spend it. And if you're spending it in front of the TV, getting half context, if you can't answer that question of is that a big number, it's not even worth putting in your head.
Yeah, no, I love it, Kevin. I appreciate you coming back. This was an awesome episode. We got your website on the screen in the show notes down below. If you do anything with government contracting, or if you maybe want to go check that out, skywayacq.com. And Kevin, I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully we'll have you back soon for maybe a more fun episode about all the things the government's doing right. That would be fun.
I think it'd be really interesting to talk about all the things the government does, all the contracts that are awarded that we don't notice, all the things that are done. And the reason I gung-ho about this, there are millions of small businesses that if they knew what the government did, and it's exactly what they do, they would be interested in the contracts that are out there. But that's a whole different rabbit trail. And there's lots of free resources to help them.
Yeah, that's why your website is in the show notes. So go check that stuff out. Get curious. Think outside the box. There are millions of different ways to grow your business. This just might be the one for you. So, Kevin, thanks for being here. And thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.